It's time for your big stat, fueled by Gatorade. Look at the Big Ten in the NFL draft. 2 overall #1 selections since 2000, Courtney Brown and Jake Long. 60 offensive and 69 defensive players chosen in the first round over the past 24 years. No Big Ten school producing more first-round picks. No surprise in Ohio State with 40. League had 9 first-round picks in 2023. Dave, you've been through this process many times in a couple of different roles. So from the team's perspective, weeks and days leading up to the draft, which starts this Thursday night, what are the teams focused on right now?
Well, right now they're working the phones to see, they're going to call every team. Are you interested in trading down? Are you interested in trading up? There'll be some teams that say, no, we're going to sit right where we're at, and we are going to pick.
So you just cross them off your list?
You just cross them off the list. If a team says, I would be interested in moving down but not up, that team goes in that category. So they're putting that together at this time. And then they're working the bullpen. The boards are already set. And the way we always did it, we would have 2 boards. In other words, there'll be 256 players drafted this year in the draft over the 3 days. And we would have a 1 board by the best player in the draft. And just for conversation, let's say it's Marvin Harrison. Okay, he would be #1, regardless of position.
Just best player.
Best player, #1 all the way down to 256. Okay, so we'll probably put 300 players on the board. And then there'll be another board by position. And now we got Caleb Williams and J.J. McCarthy, however they rank the quarterbacks. And generally you say, well, what board is more important? And if you look at, if you're a new head coach, a new general manager, you need the best players available. That's usually the way those teams go. If you are a team that feels they're close, or the coach and general manager are close to being fired, they're under a lot of pressure, they might shift to the best player, okay, by position. So I don't care the big board. Okay, Marvin Harrison's first, but we need a quarterback. The Bears are going to take a quarterback. When we had the first pick of the draft at Dallas, and it was the year leading up to the Super Bowl, we were short defensive linemen. Russell Maryland was not, a Chicago kid, was not the best player in that draft.
But you needed to fill that hole.
So we took Russell Maryland with the very first pick of the draft. So that was that type of scenario. So it varies. And then once we get the board set and we come to an agreement, you got scouts who have been following these kids for 2-3 years. They call them area scouts. So they're going repeatedly back to the school. They know the trainer, they know the weight coach, they know the assistant coaches. They are very familiar with these kids coming out. Then the coaches, they have an opinion. And I would assign, okay, go look at all the offensive linemen to my line coach. And so you got an opinion from the coaches, you got an opinion from the scouts, then the general manager gets involved with the head coach, and we got to come up with a final grade on this kid.
And sometimes those grades have to be determined by either tape and or workout. So when you evaluate, right, you're looking at the film that you've seen from 3 or 4 years in college, but you also work out guys, especially first-round guys that you might draft. How do you decide what's more important in the draft?
It's funny. Bill Parcells, and Bill Polian with quarterbacks. If the quarterback's not over 6'1", 6'2", Bill Polian, cross him off. Bill Parcells wanted his linemen a certain height, running backs a certain, where I've always done it differently. We were always going to look at production. If we could draft a linebacker, we took Dixon Edwards out of Michigan State a few years back. We were at Dallas in the 2nd round because he could run and he made 1,000 tackles. And we're sitting there watching the tape and saying, I don't know how big he is. I don't know how. We don't care. Right now, this guy makes tackles. We want this guy. So a lot of coaches, though, and general managers, they will stay with, we're not going to draft a 5'10" quarterback. We don't want Russell Maryland. He's not Drew Brees. He's not tall enough. We want those guys 6'2". So that factors in. And then lastly, which is a good story here, we're going to put a grade on him. And then let's say the kid's a great player and he's got a good grade, but he's a character issue. We might put a little blue flag on that. Anybody that's got the blue flag, that's a red. That flashes on character. Injury type of guy would be red. We're at the Miami Dolphins, And my daughters both went to Indiana. So I'm down there visiting them on a bye week, and I'm watching Indiana football. And this defensive end is making plays. I start researching Wally Gunlier. God, he's in the top 10 or so and going to be drafted. Guess what? That game, he blows his knee out. I think it was against Ohio State. Now so we got to put a red tag on him. He would have been a second-round pick or higher, but now he's a red flag because he's on crutches. So I get down during the draft, and I see our owner, Mr. Huizinga, and I says, I'd like to sign Wally Gunlier. I says, now I'm telling you this as a free agent because he's going to walk down the hall, and first time you're going to see him, he's going to be on crutches. And he says, do what you got to do. So we signed Wally, and I says, all you're going to do is rehab and run and lift, and we paid him what the minimum is to do that. And he was in Miami all year, and he got healthy, and 3 years later, he's in the Pro Bowl.
The question that everybody wants to know, how many gallons of coffee are consumed on draft day in an NFL war room?
Well, it depends on the club. Some guys are coffee drinkers. When we were at Dallas, it was Heineken and nachos for Jimmy Johnson. So everybody's got their own flavor, Rick. You know, I don't know. I was a little bit of the coffee, though.
Heineken and nachos on draft day. And yet somehow that organization picked enough guys to win Super Bowl after Super Bowl.
Yes, that's exactly right. But there is a lot to it, and these scouts have been working on these things for years. But you got to come to a happy agreement. You got to draft somebody.
Officially, the show is known as Big Ten Today. We like to call it Story Time with Wani because it is much more entertaining in that way. For Dave, I'm Rick. As always, we appreciate you hanging with us on Big Ten Today, and we'll do it again on Tuesday.